Top 10 Golden Age Heartthrobs, Hollywood's most dashing leading men, then and now. They weren't just actors, they were living myths. The gods of the silver screen, whose smoldering looks and magnetic charm defined masculinity for generations. But what if we told you that behind every square jaw and dazzling smile was a tightly guarded secret? These icons weren't born, they were built. Sculpted by studio moguls, polished by stylists, and protected by publicists who shaped every inch of their image. And when we hit number 3, prepare to be stunned. His transformation was so drastic, it would shock today's audiences and forever change the way you see one of cinema's most revered legends. As for number 4, his story is pure heartbreak. A real-life tragedy that still brings tears to fans decades later. Who was your childhood favorite? Drop their name in the comments. Personally, I'm still obsessed with those timeless classics and the irresistible magic of old Hollywood. But this list isn't just about handsome faces. It's about the machine behind the myth. These men weren't just lucky, they were meticulously crafted symbols of what American manhood was supposed to be. From the suave sophistication of the 30s to the gritty realism of the 50s, every persona was a product of powerful studio control. Today, we pull back the curtain. We'll revisit the 10 most iconic leading men of Hollywood's golden age, and reveal the truth behind their fame, their fall, and what became of them after the spotlight faded. This isn't just nostalgia, it's the real story behind the legends. Gregory Peck. When Gregory Peck first graced the silver screen in the 1940s, he wasn't just another leading man, he was a force of nature. Towering at 6 feet 3 inches with a voice that resonated like thunder and a calm strength in his eyes, Peck didn't just play men of honor, he was one. In films like To Kill a Mockingbird, Roman Holiday, and Gentleman's Agreement, he became Hollywood's moral compass, the very embodiment of quiet dignity and unwavering integrity. But what truly set Peck apart from his golden age peers wasn't just his talent, it was his consistency. On screen and off, he was the same man. While other stars had their images carefully crafted by studios, Gregory didn't need the polish. As longtime studio publicist Alan Winston once said, Greg walked into a room and commanded it. Our job wasn't to invent an image, it was to let people see the truth. Even in an industry obsessed with looks, Peck's striking features remained largely untouched. Aside from a bit of dental work in the early 40s to perfect that iconic smile, his face aged gracefully, like his legacy. By the 80s and 90s, his raven hair had turned a noble silver, and the lines on his face only deepened the sense of wisdom he always carried. When Gregory Peck passed away in 2003 at the age of 87, Hollywood didn't just lose a legend, it lost one of its last true gentlemen. A man whose real-life grace mirrored the characters he brought to life. He wasn't a manufactured star. He was the real thing. And that's what made him unforgettable. Errol Flynn. The phrase "in like Flynn" didn't just enter pop culture by accident. It was born from a man who lived like a legend. With chiseled features, reckless charm, and the swagger of a born adventurer, Errol Flynn dominated the silver screen in the 1930s and 40s. He wasn't just a star, he was the action hero, leaping into our imaginations through films like Captain Blood, The Adventures of Robin Hood, and The Sea Hawk. But behind the dazzling smile and effortless flair was a carefully manufactured illusion. When Warner Brothers plucked the unknown Australian out of obscurity, they wasted no time shaping him into Hollywood royalty. Studio records later revealed that Flynn underwent major dental reconstruction in 1935, replacing damaged teeth and reshaping others to craft that signature grin just before landing his breakout role. And that dashing, shirtless swordsman audiences adored? It took hours of grueling workouts, expert lighting, and relentless rehearsal. While Flynn had real athletic skill, his public image as a natural-born swashbuckler was the result of meticulous grooming and non-stop studio control. He understood the business of being Errol Flynn, director Michael Curtiz once said. He knew his worth, and he worked harder than anyone gave him credit for. But the illusion couldn't last forever. By the late 1940s, Flynn's hard-living ways, especially his notorious drinking, began to show. His once sculpted physique softened, his face grew puffy, and the sparkle that made him immortal on screen faded in real life. By the 1950s, fans were stunned by the man they saw in public. So different from the ageless icon burned into movie history. When Flynn died in 1959 at just 50, the contrast between the vibrant screen legend and the worn man he became was heartbreaking. Film historian Richard Schickel put it best: Flynn's transformation from golden boy to physical wreck happened with tragic speed. Yet in our collective memory, he remains forever young, forever dashing. Proof that cinema can freeze time and immortalize beauty, even as it fades in real life. Even now, his legend lives on, not as he ended, but as he once was, sword in hand, grin blazing, the very image of timeless adventure. A symbol of Hollywood's golden illusion, and the price of becoming its brightest flame. Rock Hudson. With his perfect 6 feet 5 inches in frame, square jaw, and disarming smile, Rock Hudson embodied the 1950s masculine ideal so completely that it's shocking to learn how thoroughly Universal Studios had to transform him to create that image. Born Roy Harold Scherer Jr., Hudson's metamorphosis into a leading man represents one of Hollywood's most comprehensive makeovers. When agent Henry Wilson first discovered the handsome young man working as a truck driver, he saw potential but recognized significant obstacles. Studio records show that Hudson underwent extensive coaching to lower his naturally high-pitched voice, received dental reconstruction to perfect his smile, and endured painful procedures to fix a slight ear protrusion that photographed poorly in profile shots. Even his name was manufactured rock, suggesting strength and solidity. While Hudson evoked American geography, creating a thoroughly masculine American identity. As studio publicist Mark Miller later revealed, creating Rock Hudson wasn't just about improving a few features. It was about engineering a complete product from the ground up. The physical transformation was just the beginning. Universal carefully crafted Hudson's public persona as the quintessential all-American ladies' man while hiding his homosexuality through arranged dates with starlets and eventually a sham marriage organized by the studio. This dual existence created enormous pressure for Hudson to maintain not just his physical appearance but an entirely fabricated personal life. As Hudson entered middle age in the 1960s, he worked increasingly hard to preserve his leading man image. Makeup artist Bob Schiffer recalled Hudson's growing reliance on cosmetic help. By giant, he was still naturally handsome, but by the mid-60s, we were using every trick in the book, strategic lighting, camera angles, and extensive makeup to maintain the illusion of youth. By the 1970s, Hudson had embraced character roles that accommodated his aging appearance, finding success on television in Macmillan and Wife. His once black hair had grayed naturally, and while he remained handsome, the studio-mandated perfection of his early years had given way to a more authentic appearance. The final chapter of Hudson's transformation came with tragic swiftness. When he appeared gaunt and dramatically altered at a 1985 press event with Doris Day, the public was shocked. His death from AIDS-related complications later that year at age 59 not only revealed his homosexuality to a shocked public, but underscored how thoroughly his true self had been hidden behind the manufactured image. Despite this revelation, Hudson's films continue to showcase the artificial perfection that made him a star, a celluloid monument to a manufactured ideal that, while entirely constructed, continues to influence our conception of masculine appeal. Robert Mitchum was never your typical Hollywood heartthrob. In an era of polished, picture-perfect leading men, Mitchum's sleepy eyes, weathered face, and unshakable cool made him the ultimate film noir antihero, a man who looked like he'd seen too much and cared too little. But that rugged authenticity? It wasn't entirely accidental. When Mitchum first stepped into Hollywood in the early 1940s, his face, shaped by a rough life of boxing and blue-collar jobs, was considered too raw for a leading man. RKO executives were particularly unsettled by his nose, broken multiple times before he ever faced a camera. At first, Mitchum resisted the idea of rhinoplasty, which only added to his rebel image. But after Out of the Past made him a star in 1947, he quietly agreed to a subtle nose job, not to erase his flaws, but to refine them just enough while keeping that hard-earned edge. That was Mitchum's magic. While others chased perfection, he leaned into his imperfections. His heavy-lidded eyes, once seen as a casting problem, became his signature. When a studio executive suggested an eyelid lift, Mitchum famously shot back, "The eyes stay as they are. They're what get me the interesting parts." As the years passed, Mitchum aged, but on his own terms. He didn't chase youth. He didn't try to play someone he wasn't. Instead of a full facelift, he opted for minor touch-ups to maintain his jawline, quiet adjustments that kept him looking like himself, just a little sharper around the edges. His longtime doctor called it maintenance work. Mitchum called it being real. By the time he starred in The Yakuza and Farewell, My Lovely in the mid-70s, Mitchum was in his late 50s. His face bore the lines and shadows of a life fully lived. His hair turned gray naturally. His jaw remained strong. He didn't hide from time, he wore it. As he told Esquire in 1983, "I look my age. I just make sure it's a good version of my age." That quiet confidence made Mitchum timeless. When he died in 1997 at age 79, he still looked like the man who could walk into a room and make it go silent. A face built not in a surgeon's office, but on the streets, in the shadows, and through the stories he carried in every line. As Roger Ebert once said, he's the rare star who aged into exactly who he appeared to be. In a business built on illusion, Robert Mitchum's greatest role may have been simply being himself. Paul Newman. With those piercing blue eyes, sculpted frame, and effortless charm, Paul Newman didn't just arrive on screen. He redefined what a leading man could be. In the 1950s, while old Hollywood clung to polished perfection, Newman brought something different. A masculinity that was strong yet sensitive, rugged yet undeniably real. But even icons have their secrets. Though Newman radiated authenticity, his rise to stardom involved a few quiet enhancements. Early in his career, studio heads pushed for subtle adjustments. A nose slightly off from a sports injury, ears that needed a gentler silhouette on camera. Makeup legend Dick Smith later confessed, "Paul had a natural glow, but the close-ups were unforgiving. We'd tape his ears back for early films, refine shadows, highlight symmetry. It was all about enhancing what was already there, never masking it." What set Newman apart wasn't just his face, it was his philosophy. Where others chased youth with surgeries and facelifts, Newman chose truth. After those early tweaks, he let time sculpt his face. He aged with grace, relying on fitness, discipline, and a deep understanding of character rather than artificial tricks. By the time he starred in The Verdict, 1982, and Nobody's Fool, 1994, the fine lines on his face didn't fade his appeal, they deepened it. His silver hair shimmered with dignity. His blue eyes still cut through the screen, wiser, more soulful. Director Sidney Pollack once said, "Paul had this rare confidence. He knew that aging on screen would unlock roles others couldn't touch. He wasn't clinging to youth, he was chasing depth. And he found it." While many of his peers faded into obscurity or character roles, Newman remained a leading man well into his 70s. In Road to Perdition, 2002, at age 77, his presence was hauntingly powerful, his weathered face a map of experience, strength, and sorrow. When he passed in 2008 at 83, the tributes didn't just mourn a handsome star. They honored a man who let us watch him live, decade by decade, wrinkle by wrinkle, film by film. As film critic Leonard Maltin perfectly put it, Newman gave us a gift no other leading man dared. He let us see him age, honestly, without vanity, and with unmatched grace. In a town obsessed with youth, Paul Newman proved that authenticity could be the boldest kind of beauty, and the smartest kind of legacy. Gene Kelly. With a grin that could light up a room and moves that felt like poetry in motion, Gene wasn't just a dancer, he was a force of nature. He didn't just perform in musicals, he redefined them. With unmatched athleticism and charm, he created a new kind of leading man, strong, graceful, and unapologetically masculine. But behind that seemingly effortless energy was a man working tirelessly to protect an image built on illusion. When Kelly first arrived in Hollywood in 1941, fresh off Broadway, MGM saw his potential, but also saw flaws that needed fixing. His teeth weren't camera-ready, so he underwent extensive dental work, reshaping his smile into the megawatt trademark fans would come to adore. More difficult to hide was his receding hairline, already noticeable in his late 20s. The studio's solution? Custom-made toupees so finely crafted they were nearly invisible, even during his most intense dance routines. They were works of art, recalled his longtime makeup artist, William Tuttle. Because with Gene's physical style, anything less than perfect wouldn't hold up. Each film required several identical hairpieces, sweat, reshoots, and dance rehearsals demanded constant replacements. But the image had to remain seamless. From An American in Paris to Singin' in the Rain, the man audiences saw, youthful, tireless, magnetic, was the result of extreme discipline, both in front of and behind the camera. Kelly kept that dedication as he aged. In the 70s, when appearing on television, he leaned on advanced makeup, clever lighting, and ever-evolving hair systems to preserve the vibrant persona that had defined his career. By the 80s, dancing was no longer part of his public identity, but the legend was still carefully polished. Even into his 70s, he never appeared in public without preparation. He knew the truth: his brand wasn't just good looks, it was boundless vitality. As film historian Janine Basinger noted, his image was harder to maintain than most. It wasn't about just being handsome, it was about convincing the world you could dance forever. When Gene Kelly passed away in 1996 at 83, many hadn't seen him for years. But that was intentional. He faded from public view so his memory could stay untouched, forever splashing through puddles, spinning lampposts, full of joy and motion. His protege, choreographer Kenny Ortega, put it best: Gene knew his legacy wasn't just about what he did, it was about how he looked doing it. And he made sure we'd remember him that way, always in motion, always alive. James Dean. Forever young, forever heartbreaking. James Dean didn't need a long career to become a legend, just 3 films and a tragic ending at 24. With that, he became Hollywood's eternal rebel, a symbol of youth, defiance, and haunting beauty, frozen in time. But behind that effortless image was a carefully orchestrated illusion. When Dean first arrived in Hollywood in the early 1950s, he was far from the polished icon we now remember. His early headshots show a handsome but unremarkable young man. Crooked teeth, acne-prone skin, and a shy demeanor. Warner Brothers had doubts. But everything changed when director Elia Kazan cast him in East of Eden, 1955, and helped sculpt not just his performance, but his persona. Dean underwent dental work, used custom makeup techniques to hide blemishes, and even had wardrobe fittings down to the thread. Costume designer Moss Mabry later revealed they tested dozens of t-shirts before choosing the perfect cut for Rebel Without a Cause. His jeans were pre-distressed. His hair was tousled just enough to seem untouched. Every detail was designed to say, "I don't care," while caring deeply. And that was Dean's genius, making something so curated feel raw and real. His rebellious image wasn't a rejection of Hollywood, but a masterful rebranding of it. As film historian David Thompson put it, Dean made perfection look like imperfection. Then came the crash. September 30th, 1955. Just as Rebel Without a Cause was gearing up for release, and Giant was still filming, Dean died in a high-speed car accident. Overnight, he transformed from rising star to immortal icon. He never aged past 24. And so, the myth was sealed. In the years that followed, studios retouched flawed photos, hid less flattering images, and amplified the legend. Dean didn't grow older, didn't evolve, didn't change. He became a permanent fixture of youthful rebellion and tragic allure. What breaks our hearts isn't just that he died too young, but that we'll never know the man he might have become. Would his looks have matured into rugged gravitas? Would he have fought or embraced aging? Would his wild charisma have deepened or faded? We'll never know. Unlike other stars who aged before our eyes, James Dean remains forever young, perfectly imperfect, and painfully incomplete. His story is a beautiful beginning with no middle and no end, a flame that burned too fast and left a shadow too powerful to forget. Clark Gable, the undisputed king of Hollywood. With his smoldering gaze and commanding charm, he lit up the silver screen in classics like Gone with the Wind and It Happened One Night. But behind that iconic smile and dashing presence was a man carefully sculpted by the Hollywood machine, quite literally. When Gable first arrived in Tinseltown in the late 1920s, MGM executives saw potential, but also problems. His ears stuck out, his teeth were a mess, and his rugged face lacked the refinement of a leading man. So, the transformation began. In 1932, Gable underwent a painful procedure to pin his ears back, without general anesthesia, relying only on local numbing and alcohol. The surgery left scars hidden behind the scenes, but on screen, it helped create a more symmetrical, photogenic face. His dental work was even more extreme. Years of neglect and infection had ruined his teeth. MGM ordered nearly all of them removed and replaced with dentures. The difference was dramatic. His once uneven smile became the confident grin fans adored. Even his wife, actress Carole Lombard, joked about it, once gifting him a box of spare dentures with a note, "Keep these close. That smile belongs to me now." As Gable's star rose, so did the illusion. By his late 30s, during the filming of Gone with the Wind, he was already wearing hairpieces to cover his receding hairline. Makeup artists became magicians, contouring his jawline and masking the toll of age. Yet none of it reached the public. Studio secrecy was ironclad. Audiences believed they were watching a naturally flawless icon. But the truth unraveled near the end. On the set of The Misfits in 1961, long hours in makeup were required just to maintain his image. Gable, now in his late 50s, appeared frail in real life, so different from the myth Hollywood had sold for decades. When he died of a heart attack shortly after filming, fans were stunned by how much he had changed. Clark Gable's transformation is one of the most startling in Hollywood history, not because it failed, but because it succeeded so well. The man the world fell in love with was, in many ways, a masterpiece of illusion. He wasn't just a star, he was a testament to Hollywood's ability to create legends from raw clay, sculpting not only stories but the very people who told them. Cary Grant. The name alone conjures an image of effortless charm, timeless elegance, and that iconic million-dollar smile. But as the man himself once famously said, "Everyone wants to be Cary Grant. Even I want to be Cary Grant." Beneath the tuxedoed grace and leading man magnetism was a man who knew exactly what it took to keep the illusion alive. Born Archibald Leach, Grant didn't just become a star, he engineered one. His transformation began in the early 1930s when Hollywood demanded perfection. Paramount Studio records reveal that in 1932, Grant underwent extensive dental work, crafting the symmetrical, dazzling smile that would help define classic Hollywood glamour. But it wasn't just about teeth. By the 1950s, Grant was still playing heartthrobs opposite actresses 20 or 30 years younger. How did he stay so ageless? Insiders later confirmed that he had a subtle upper eyelid lift, blepharoplasty, around 1957, eliminating the tired look creeping into his screen presence. Even Alfred Hitchcock, his frequent collaborator, hinted at it in a 1966 interview, before quickly changing the subject, preserving the era's silent code around male cosmetic work. What set Grant apart wasn't just that he had work done, it was how he did it. Everything was subtle. No frozen expressions. No unnatural tucks. Just minor tweaks to preserve the Cary Grant people loved. He didn't try to look 30 at 50, he just wanted to look like the best version of himself. That restraint, according to modern experts, remains the gold standard of cosmetic enhancement. Off-screen, Grant was also ahead of his time. He followed a meticulous regimen of facial exercises, skincare, diet, and fitness, decades before male grooming was even a topic. His longtime friend Katharine Hepburn once remarked that Grant treated his looks like a prized possession, something maintained with the care of a vintage car or fine timepiece. And when the time came, he bowed out gracefully. At 62, after finishing Walk, Don't Run in 1966, Grant retired from acting. He refused to let age dictate his legacy, stepping away before audiences could ever see him fade. For the next 20 years, he stayed out of the spotlight. And when he passed in 1986 at 82, many fans were stunned by how different he looked, because to them, he never aged. Cary Grant didn't just play roles, he embodied them. His legacy wasn't just built on talent, but on mastery of image, timing, and presentation. In a town that creates illusions, he perfected his own. An eternal icon shaped not just by nature, but by knowing when to polish the mirror. Humphrey Bogart. The illusion of authenticity. When you think of Humphrey Bogart, you think of grit. That gravelly voice, the steely stare, the weathered charm. He was the ultimate tough guy of Hollywood's golden age. But behind that raw masculinity was one of the most carefully constructed images in film history. Bogart didn't fit the traditional mold of a leading man. In the early 1930s, Warner Brothers saw potential in him, but also saw flaws, especially a slight lisp and a stiff upper lip, the result of a Navy injury during World War I. Most studios would have tried to fix it, but instead they leaned into it. That speech quirk, that scar, it became part of his mystique. Makeup artist Perk Westmore later admitted, "With Bogey, we did the opposite of what we did with other stars. We highlighted what others would hide." Lighting crews accentuated the shadow around his lip, enhancing the intensity of his expressions. His slightly rough, lived-in look, stubble, mussed hair, rumpled clothes, wasn't laziness. It was calculated. Every frame was designed to sell the image of a man who didn't care about appearances, even though the truth was quite the opposite. As Bogart aged, that rugged image took more work to maintain. His hairline thinned, his jawline softened. Strategically placed hairpieces and evolving makeup techniques kept the illusion intact. But when director John Huston insisted on a no-makeup Bogart for the African Queen in 1951, audiences were stunned. The weathered, weary man on screen was far from the polished anti-hero they knew, proof that even the realest personas in Hollywood were the product of backstage magic. In his final years, as cancer ravaged his body, makeup artists quietly worked overtime to preserve the image fans had come to love. By the time Bogart passed away in 1957 at age 57, the gap between the man and the myth had never been wider. And yet, unlike many stars whose shine fades with time, Bogart's legacy only grew stronger. His genius was never in pretending to be perfect. It was in making the imperfect unforgettable. As film critic Roger Ebert once said, Bogart wasn't conventionally handsome, but he was cinematically handsome. He made flaws magnetic. He made realness feel iconic. And in doing so, he changed what it meant to be a leading man. In an industry built on illusion, Humphrey Bogart pulled off the greatest trick of all. He convinced the world he wasn't playing one. And there you have it, 10 legends whose looks defined an era and whose charisma still echoes through the silver screen. These weren't just handsome faces. They were icons who blended charm, mystery, and undeniable presence into something unforgettable. From tailored tuxedos to timeless close-ups, they shaped what it meant to be a leading man, not just in their day, but for generations to come. So, which of these Hollywood heartthrobs still takes your breath away? Let us know in the comments below. And if you loved this trip back in time, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more journeys into the golden age of glamour, charm, and unforgettable stars.